want to bring in Hassan Hassan. He's with the Center for Global Policy and the author of ISIS, Inside the Army of Terror, a New York Times bestseller. He joins me now from Washington. Thanks, Hassan, for being with us. First of all, what do you make of the suggestion that this attack originated from inside Iran? Do you think that's likely? Is it knowing how surveilled, how much, satellite surveillance there is in that part of the world? Would they do something like this?
Yeah, it's very likely because the other alternatives is that emanated from Yemen, and that's far away. It's actually harder to emanate from Yemen. The Iraqis also refused or kind of declined or said denied the attack originated from Iraq. It's a very sophisticated, highly sophisticated attack. It's most likely came from Iran, as the U.S. has assessed so far.
You say, you told my producer, this is asymmetric warfare taken to a whole new level. What do you mean by that?
Absolutely. If you look at over the past few years, Iran has become increasingly more anxious about the military buildup on the other side of the Gulf, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and other countries. And it's becoming increasingly fearful of what that means in the future. So in order to prevent those countries from becoming the masters of the sky, if you like, what it's doing now is it's up in the game when it comes to drone attacks. And that's a whole new game in the Middle East. This is new. What you see around the Persian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz, and so on and so forth. It's really a combination of an ancient game of piracy, but also the modern technology of drones and drone attacks. These countries are becoming helpless when it comes to, rolling back these small attacks that are emanating from the Yemen threat in the south of Saudi Arabia, but also in Iraq and other countries around the Gulf region.
If this is Iran, what is Iran trying to achieve with this particular attack on such a sensitive part of the Saudi economy? I mean, it's beating heart, basically. Yeah. It's oil fields.
Absolutely. I think there are two things are playing out. First, you could see this as Iran knows that Saudi Arabia has very little, doesn't have the ability to counter these attacks. Iran has the plausible deniability. It says this is not us, and it keeps denying it. And it knows that at this time, at this very critical juncture for Saudi Arabia, Saudi Arabia is not a popular actor, not in the region, but also not in the United States and elsewhere. So it's very hard, for example, if Trump decides to act on behalf of Saudi Arabia and retaliate to punish Iran. It's very hard for that act to be justified. Remember, only 2 months ago, a U.S. drone was shot down by Iran, and the Americans could not attack and could not retaliate to that. So imagine if Trump administration is trying now to retaliate against Iran on behalf of Saudi Arabia. That's not going to be a popular opinion. But another factor I think is very important, which is that why is Iran doing that now? It seems like it's lashing out. And I think that's an indication of how hard and biting the sanctions imposed by the Trump administration. I think Iran has changed the way it operates in the Middle East. For a long time, it was always kind of kept a distance, tried to play cool, prevent others from seeing it as an aggressive attack in other countries. And that's what it says in public. That's the statements always say, Iran doesn't attack, it only helps its neighbors. Now it's doing something else. It's doing
apologies for jumping in. It's playing with fire if it's Iran, literally and figuratively, in the sense that if it is Iran, and again, we've not seen evidence of this, it is becoming more and more provocative. First, reportedly shooting a drone, a U.S. drone out of the sky, but now also going really deep into Saudi territory. If this is Iran, this is a proper act of warfare.
Yeah, absolutely. So Iran is, so far we don't know, and that's the point, we don't have evidence that Iran has done that, has conducted, and that's part of the calculation. It doesn't want people to have evidence that it conducted that attack, whether directly or indirectly, whether through directly through Iran or through proxies and so on and so forth. And what it's doing that because there is a fight going on against them, and both the Iranian officials said publicly recently that there is a war going on against Iran, which is the economic war. And that is actually hitting them very hard in Syria, in Iraq, in Lebanon, elsewhere, where they are suffering. They've seen these sanctions are biting, the economic sanctions against them. So they want to do something to retaliate. And first they threatened the Emiratis, for example, that Dubai and Abu Dhabi is going to be attacked first if Iran is attacked. And that was the height of the tension between the Americans and Iran 2 months ago or a month ago. So I think that's part of its way of saying, you know what, if you attack us, if you think about attacking us, this is what's going to happen. But also there's a cost going on if you continue upping the game against us, which is in terms of economic sanctions.
And lastly, what does Saudi Arabia want the United States to do?
Well, it wants the Americans to show that they stand by them and that they have an ally they can count on when Iran...
Because they have that already, don't they? I mean, don't they already have that assurance from Donald Trump?
Mostly in talk, not in action. Remember also that the Emiratis have just abandoned the Saudis in Yemen. So Saudi Arabia is now a very isolated country in the region and internationally, partly or actually in large part because of its own behavior. Remember, this is almost the 1-year anniversary of the killing and the murder of Jamal Khashoggi in Turkey. So they feel that isolation. That actually isolation has started to play against them in concrete terms. The Congress vote against the Yemen war, the inability of the Trump administration to actually publicly say we stand by Saudi Arabia, at least in action rather than just talk. So it's becoming really increasingly harder for Saudi Arabia to count on its allies against Iran, and Iran is becoming more and more confident that nobody is going to stand with Saudi Arabia against Iran, especially in a kind of in a hostile situation.
All right, thank you so much, Hassan Hassan, the author of ISIS Inside the Army of Terror. Thank you for joining us as always.
My pleasure.